The silver Aston Martin screeched to a halt in front of the modest brownstone, looking as out of place as its owner felt. Jackson Moore checked his watch 7:28 p.m. and considered, not for the first time that evening, simply driving away. The thought of spending his Friday night playing board games with his college roommate's friends, instead of reviewing quarterly reports, seemed absurd for the CEO of Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Yet here he was, 2 minutes early and completely out of his element. "You need a life outside that corner office," his sister had insisted after he'd canceled their third dinner in a row. Perhaps she was right. At 34, Jackson had built an empire but forgotten how to have fun. He grabbed the bottle of 18-year-old Macallan from the passenger seat and approached the door, pressing the buzzer before he could change his mind. The door swung open almost immediately, revealing his old friend Tyler with a ridiculous Viking hat perched on his head. "Jack. You actually came." Tyler's genuine shock was understandable. Jackson had declined these invitations consistently for over a year. "I said I would, didn't I?" Jackson stepped inside, loosening his tie. The sound of laughter floated from somewhere deeper in the apartment. "Yeah, but you say a lot of things, Mr. Big Shot. Come in, everyone's setting up in the living room." Jackson followed Tyler through the narrow hallway adorned with framed vintage movie posters, a collection Tyler had started during their college days. The familiar sight brought a rush of nostalgia. Back then, Jackson had been just another pre-med student with dreams, not the man whose decisions impacted thousands of employees worldwide. The living room hummed with conversation. 3 people were arranging an elaborate board game on the coffee table while 2 others debated loudly about the rules. Jackson recognized no one except Tyler's girlfriend, Hannah. "Everyone, this is Jack," Tyler announced. "My college roommate who finally remembered I exist." "The one who runs that pharmaceutical company?" a bearded man asked. Jackson nodded, uncomfortable with the immediate recognition. "That's me." "We thought you were a myth Tyler made up to sound important," the bearded man laughed. "I'm Kevin." Introductions continued around the circle. Hannah, Kevin, and his wife Rachel, Tyler's cousin Marcus, and this is Jasmine, Tyler said, gesturing to the woman directly to Jackson's left. "She's new to the group too, works at the Children's Hospital downtown." Jackson turned and felt the world tilt slightly. Jasmine Powell had the kind of face that didn't need makeup to be striking, though she wore a touch of it anyway. Her dark hair fell in natural waves around her shoulders, and when she smiled, her eyes crinkled at the corners in a way that suggested she did it often. "Nice to meet you," she said, extending her hand. "I've been promised these game nights are legendary, though I'm not entirely convinced yet." Her handshake was firm, her palm warm against his. Jackson noticed a small tattoo on her wrist, a simple caduceus. "Doctor?" he asked, nodding toward the medical symbol. "Pediatric oncologist," she confirmed. "You've got a good eye." "I work with a lot of doctors." He felt oddly tongue-tied, which was ridiculous. Jackson routinely addressed boardrooms full of intimidating executives without breaking a sweat. "Right, the pharmaceutical company." Her eyes studied him with quiet intelligence. "Meridian, isn't it? You're doing interesting work with targeted immunotherapies." Surprise must have registered on his face because she laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to warm the room. "I keep up with research in my field," she explained. "Your company's pediatric leukemia trials look promising." Before Jackson could respond, Tyler announced it was time to start playing. The game, something involving building settlements and trading resources, required enough concentration that Jackson found himself gradually relaxing. He settled into the worn leather couch, coincidentally next to Jasmine, who turned out to be a formidable opponent. "You're hoarding all the brick," she accused him an hour into the game. "Strategic resource allocation," Jackson replied with the hint of a smile. "Basic business principle." "Well, I'm about to enact some strategic wealth redistribution," she countered, laying down a card that forced him to surrender half his cards. The group's collective ooh-oh made Jackson laugh out loud, something he hadn't done in longer than he cared to admit. Jasmine's triumphant smile was worth the setback. As the evening progressed through 3 different games and several rounds of drinks, Jackson found himself repeatedly drawn to Jasmine's perspective. Unlike the sycophants who populated his professional life, she challenged him directly, disagreed thoughtfully, and seemed utterly unimpressed by his title. During a break between games, he found himself alone with her in Tyler's kitchen as they refilled their drinks. "So how does a high-powered CEO end up at a Friday night game gathering?" she asked, leaning against the counter. "You don't strike me as a regular." "That obvious, huh?" Jackson ran a hand through his dark hair. "My sister thinks I'm becoming a hermit. Said I needed to remember what having friends is like. Smart sister." "She'll be thrilled to hear you say that." He poured himself a glass of water. "What about you? How'd you end up here?" "Hannah and I work together. She's been trying to get me out more since my fellowship ended. Apparently I spend too much time with sick children and not enough with people my own age." Jackson nodded. "I get that. It's easier sometimes when work matters." "It does matter," she agreed. "But so does." She gestured vaguely toward the living room where laughter erupted. "This." When they returned to the group, Jackson found himself more aware of Jasmine's presence, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, how her laugh started deep and built into something musical, the intelligent spark in her eyes when she was plotting her next move. At midnight, when Jackson finally checked his watch, he was shocked by how quickly the hours had passed. "Same time next Friday?" Tyler asked as everyone gathered their belongings. To his own surprise, Jackson nodded. "I'll be there." Outside, as they all dispersed to their cars, Jackson found himself walking beside Jasmine toward the parking lot. "Which one's yours?" he asked. She pointed to a sensible blue Subaru. "That practical specimen over there." "You," Jackson gestured toward the Aston Martin. "Of course," she laughed. "Very CEO appropriate." "It's my one indulgence," he admitted, slightly embarrassed. "We all need something." She paused at her car door. "It was nice meeting you, Jackson. You're not at all what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone much more self-important, honestly." Her frankness was refreshing. "You have a reputation in medical circles as being brilliant but ruthless." "Ruthless?" The description stung more than it should have. "Rumor has it you once fired an entire research division for missing a deadline." Jackson grimaced. "That's not exactly how it happened. The division had falsified data to cover their delays. It compromised patient safety. The team was reassigned, not fired." "Ah," she studied his face. "That makes more sense. The man I played games with tonight doesn't seem like someone who fires people for minor mistakes." Their conversation extended another 20 minutes in the chilly night air until Jasmine finally glanced at her watch. "I should go. Early rounds tomorrow." "Of course." Jackson hesitated. "I enjoyed meeting you, Dr. Powell." "Jasmine," she corrected. "Only my patients call me Dr. Powell." She opened her car door but turned back. "See you next Friday? I'll be there." Jackson watched her drive away, aware of an unfamiliar feeling expanding in his chest. For the first time in years, he was genuinely looking forward to something that wasn't related to work. The following Friday couldn't arrive fast enough. Jackson rescheduled a dinner with potential investors, delegated 3 major tasks he would normally handle himself, and left the office at 5, causing his assistant Diane to ask if he was feeling well. When he arrived at Tyler's, he was disappointed to find Jasmine hadn't arrived yet. An hour into the first game, Tyler received a text. "Jasmine's stuck at the hospital," he announced. "Emergency with a patient. She says to start without her." Jackson tried not to let his disappointment show, focusing instead on the complex strategy game Marcus had brought. Around 10, when the doorbell rang, he found himself straightening in his seat. Jasmine entered looking exhausted, still in scrubs beneath her coat, her hair hastily pulled back. "Sorry I'm late," she said, collapsing into an empty chair. "Rough day." "Everything okay?" Hannah asked. Jasmine shook her head slightly. Lost a patient, 7-year-old boy. His cancer was too advanced by the time they found it. The room fell silent. Jackson watched as she forced a smile. But I didn't come here to bring everyone down. What are we playing? You don't have to play, Tyler offered. Just hang out. I want to, she insisted. I need the distraction. They dealt her into the game, but Jackson could see her struggling to focus. During a break, he found her alone in the kitchen again, staring blankly at a glass of water. Want to talk about it? He asked quietly. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. Not really, but thank you, he nodded, understanding. Sometimes distraction isn't enough. No, she agreed. Sometimes it isn't. Do you want to get out of here? Get some air? She considered for a moment, then nodded. Actually, yes. Jackson made their excuses to the group, ignoring Tyler's raised eyebrows. Outside, the October night was crisp and clear. Where to? He asked. Somewhere with a view, she suggested. I need perspective tonight. 20 minutes later, they sat on a bench in Riverview Park, overlooking the city skyline. Jasmine hugged her knees to her chest. His name was Ethan, she said finally. He loved dinosaurs and could name every single one, wanted to be a paleontologist. Jackson remained silent, giving her space to continue. His parents brought him in too late. They thought it was just growing pains. She shook her head. By the time we diagnosed the osteosarcoma, it had metastasized to his lungs. We tried everything. I'm sorry, Jackson said softly. The worst part is early detection would have given him a fighting chance. With the right treatment protocol, she trailed off. That's why your work matters, he said. And mine. She looked at him then, really looked at him. It is, but days like today, it doesn't feel like enough. I know. He hesitated, then added, our new pediatric cancer treatment could be ready for trials next year. It might help the next Ethan. That's something, she acknowledged. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Tell me about your company, she said suddenly. How did you end up running a pharmaceutical empire at, what are you, 35? 34, he corrected. And it's hardly an empire. 10,000 employees in 15 countries. I'd call that an empire. Jackson was surprised she knew those details. I started with a research grant right out of medical school. My father had died of Parkinson's, and I was developing a new approach to neurodegenerative disorders. You're a doctor? She asked, clearly surprised. Technically, yes, though I haven't practiced in years. My research led to a breakthrough drug. I needed funding to develop it properly, so I started Meridian. One success led to another, and the company grew. You never wanted to practice medicine, Jackson considered the question. I thought I did. But I realized I could help more people through research and development than I ever could seeing patients individually. Scale versus personal connection, she mused. Exactly. Though I admit, sometimes I miss the human element. He turned toward her. That's what impresses me about what you do. You're in the trenches every day, facing the hardest parts of medicine head-on. Some days are harder than others. She looked back at the city lights. Thank you for this. I needed to clear my head. Anytime, he said, meaning it. When he drove her back to her car at Tyler's, something had shifted between them. As she got out of his car, she turned back. Same time next Friday? I wouldn't miss it, he replied, but the following Friday it was Jackson who couldn't make it. A crisis with a manufacturing facility in Singapore kept him on conference calls throughout the night. He texted Tyler his apologies, but found himself wishing he had Jasmine's number to explain directly. He considered asking Tyler for it, but something held him back. Their connection, whatever it was, felt too new, too fragile to push. The Friday after that, Jackson arrived early, hoping to catch a few minutes with Jasmine before everyone else arrived. To his disappointment, she wasn't there and didn't show up all evening. When he casually asked Hannah about her absence, he learned she was presenting at a medical conference in Chicago. She'll be back next week, Hannah assured him with a knowing smile that made Jackson wonder how transparent his interest was. The following Friday, Jackson found himself checking the clock repeatedly during an afternoon meeting. At 6:30, he was the first to arrive at Tyler's, apart from Tyler himself. Eager much, Tyler teased, handing him a beer. "She'll be here. And for what it's worth, she asked about you last time too." Jackson felt a ridiculous surge of pleasure at this information. "We just have interesting conversations." "Sure, that's it," Tyler laughed. "Just like Hannah and I had interesting conversations before we started dating." Before Jackson could respond, the doorbell rang. When Jasmine walked in, her face lit up upon seeing him, and Jackson felt something shift in his chest. "The busy CEO returns," she said, settling beside him on the couch. "Singapore crisis averted. You heard about that." "I asked Tyler why you weren't here." She shrugged, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I wanted to tell you about a patient who might be perfect for one of your clinical trials." It was an excuse and they both knew it, but Jackson appreciated the professional pretext. "Tell me about them," he said, genuinely interested. As more friends arrived and the games began, Jackson found himself hyper-aware of Jasmine beside him. Their knees occasionally touched. When she reached for game pieces, her arm brushed his. Each contact sent a current through him that he hadn't felt in years. That night established a pattern. Every Friday, they'd meet at Tyler's, play games with the group, and inevitably find moments to talk privately. Sometimes they'd step outside for fresh air. Other times, they'd linger in the kitchen or be the last to leave, extending their conversations into the parking lot. They discussed everything: their work, their families, books they'd read, places they'd traveled. Jackson learned that Jasmine had grown up in a small town, the daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse. She'd worked her way through medical school on scholarships and student loans. She had a younger brother who was a firefighter and a cat named Hippocrates who hated everyone except her. In turn, he shared parts of himself. He rarely revealed how his father's long illness had shaped his career path, how the early years of building Meridian had nearly broken him, how success had gradually isolated him from normal life. "You're not what the business magazines make you out to be," she told him one night as they walked around the block, both reluctant to end their evening. "What do they make me out to be?" A ruthless corporate titan, the pharmaceutical prince with the Midas touch. Jackson groaned. "That nickname, I hate it." "It's not entirely wrong though," she observed. "You do turn things to gold, professionally speaking." "At what cost though?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. She looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes I wonder if I've sacrificed too much for success. Family, relationships, normal life experiences." He hesitated. "When was the last time I did anything just because it was fun, before these game nights, I mean?" "What would you do if you could do anything just for fun?" she asked. He considered the question. "I used to sail. My grandfather taught me when I was young. I haven't been in years." "Why not?" "No time, no one to go with." "Those sound like excuses," she challenged gently. "They are," he admitted. "The truth is, I forgot how to prioritize anything but work." "Well," she said, "it's never too late to remember." The following week, instead of texting about game night, Jackson called Jasmine directly. Tyler had finally given him her number after weeks of teasing. "I'm not going to make it Friday," he said when she answered. "Oh." She couldn't quite hide her disappointment. "Big crisis at work?" "No," he replied. "I was wondering if you might want to do something else instead, just the two of us." The pause that followed felt eternal. "What did you have in mind?" she finally asked. "Sailing. Saturday morning." "If you're free." "You have a boat?" She sounded surprised. "I do. It doesn't get nearly enough use." Another pause. "Are you asking me on a date, Jackson Moore?" He took a breath. "Yes, Jasmine Powell, I believe I am." "Then yes." He could hear the smile in her voice. "I'd love to." Saturday dawned clear and perfect. Jackson arrived at the marina early, checking everything on his 36-foot sloop twice. When Jasmine pulled up, the sight of her in simple jeans and a sweater, hair loose in the breeze, made his heart race like he was 20 again. "This is gorgeous," she said, admiring the sleek vessel. "What's her name?" "Second opinion," Jackson replied with a grin. She laughed. "Very appropriate for a doctor turned pharmaceutical CEO." The day unfolded like something from a dream. Jackson taught her the basics of sailing, enjoying her quick grasp of the principles and her willingness to try everything. They navigated along the coastline, talking easily as they had during their game night conversations, but with a new layer of openness. When he helped her adjust the mainsail, standing close behind her to guide her hands on the rope, he caught the scent of her hair, something citrusy and clean. She turned her head slightly and their eyes met. For a moment he thought about kissing her, but something held him back. They anchored in a secluded cove for lunch, a gourmet picnic Jackson had arranged. As they sat on deck enjoying the food and wine, Jasmine studied him. "Can I ask you something personal?" she ventured. "Of course." "With your success, your looks, your obvious charm when you choose to use it." She gestured vaguely at him. "Why are you single? There must be women lining up." Jackson considered his answer carefully. "There have been relationships, none that lasted. The last serious one ended 3 years ago." "What happened?" She said. "I was married to my company." Said I'd never make room for anything else. He looked out at the water. She wasn't entirely wrong. And now, he met her gaze. "Now I'm realizing what I've been missing." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. This time, when he leaned forward, she met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, questioning a beginning rather than a culmination. When they pulled apart, her smile made everything in Jackson's complicated life suddenly seem very simple. That day marked a turning point. While they still attended Tyler's game nights, they also began seeing each other outside the group. Jackson took her sailing again. Jasmine introduced him to her favorite hole-in-the-wall restaurants. They attended a medical charity gala together, making their first public appearance as a couple. The tabloids noticed immediately. "Pharmaceutical prince finds his princess in doctor," ran one headline, accompanied by a photo of them laughing together at the gala. Jackson waited for Jasmine to be bothered by the attention, but she shrugged it off. "Occupational hazard of dating you, I guess," she said when he apologized. "As long as they don't start camping outside my apartment, I can handle a few silly headlines." 3 months into their relationship, they faced their first real challenge. Jasmine was offered a fellowship at a prestigious children's hospital in Boston, a career-defining opportunity that would last 2 years. "I have to take it," she told him one evening as they sat in his penthouse overlooking the city. "It's everything I've worked toward." "I know," he said, trying to mask his dismay at the thought of her leaving. "You should absolutely take it." "But," she prompted, sensing his reservation, "but I'll miss you." He took her hand. "These past months have been the happiest I can remember." "For me too," she admitted. "Which makes this so hard." They sat in silence for several minutes, both contemplating what this meant for their relationship. "We could try long distance," she suggested. "It's only a 1-hour flight, with your schedule and mine." He left the thought unfinished. "Are you saying this is it? We're over before we really begin?" There was a hint of hurt in her voice. "No," Jackson said firmly. "That's not what I'm saying at all." He squeezed her hand. "I'm saying we need to figure this out together." Over the next few weeks, they discussed various solutions. Jackson could open a Boston office and split his time. Jasmine could potentially commute back some weekends. They researched flights, apartments, schedules. "This is crazy," she said one night as they lay in bed surrounded by calendars and flight timetables. "Normal couples don't go to these lengths." "We're not a normal couple," Jackson pointed out. "And I think that's worth something." The night before Jasmine was scheduled to fly to Boston to look at apartments, Jackson took her to dinner at the restaurant where they'd had their second date. After the meal, he seemed unusually quiet. "Everything okay?" she asked as they walked along the waterfront afterward. "I've been thinking about what you said about normal couples," he began. "You're right. This is a lot of effort for a relationship that's still relatively new." Jasmine's heart sank. "So you've changed your mind? You don't think we should try?" "No," he said, stopping to face her. "I'm thinking maybe we should try something completely different." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Jasmine's eyes widened. "Jackson, just hear me out," he said quickly. I know it's fast, I know we have obstacles, but these past months have shown me what's actually important in life. For years, I built a company, accumulated success, and told myself it was enough. Then I met you and everything shifted. He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. I'm not asking you to choose between your career and me. I would never do that. I'm asking if you'd consider building a life with me, one where we both pursue our passions but do it together. I can open that Boston office. You can do your fellowship. We can figure out the logistics as we go. Are you actually proposing? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I am. He took a deep breath. Jasmine Powell, I love you. Will you marry me? She stared at the ring, then back at his face, tears welling in her eyes. This is insane. We've only known each other for months. I know, he acknowledged, but I also know with absolute certainty that what we have is real, worth fighting for, worth rearranging lives for. My fellowship. You'll take it. I'll support you every step of the way. She searched his face, finding nothing but sincerity. You'd really do that, restructure your entire company for me, in a heartbeat, he smiled. Actually, I already started the process. The Boston office lease is signed. You did that before you knew my answer. I did it because I know what I want. Now I'm just hoping you want the same thing. A slow smile spread across her face. Yes, 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 I'll marry you, Jackson Moore, she laughed through her tears. This is completely crazy, but yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, Jackson felt all the pieces of his life finally falling into place. The man who had spent years building an empire discovered that his greatest achievement might be the love he'd found on an ordinary game night, sitting beside a woman who taught him that some things were worth more than success. 1 year later, they stood together on the deck of Second Opinion, now docked in Boston Harbor. Jasmine's fellowship was going exceptionally well, and Jackson had successfully established Meridian's East Coast headquarters nearby. They'd been married for 6 months, a small ceremony with close friends and family, including a very smug Tyler who claimed full matchmaking credit. No regrets? Jackson asked as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant orange and pink. Jasmine leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. Not one, only that I spent so many years thinking work was enough. He kissed the top of her head. Thank goodness for game nights. And persistent friends, she added. And the courage to take chances, he concluded, turning her toward him for a kiss that still felt like coming home, even after all these months. As the last light faded from the sky, they stood together in the growing darkness. The CEO who had joined his buddy's game night, and the woman who had unexpectedly captured his heart, 2 lives now intertwined in ways neither could have imagined that first Friday evening when fate had seated them side by side.